Um, all right, welcome back. It has been an absolute thrill and a privilege to have spent the last 3 days with all of you. I have learned so much from speaking with the nuns, from the other researchers, and from speaking with members of our audience. So it's just been a real honor. So this morning, I'm going to talk a little bit about the science of happiness. The field of research on happiness is actually quite broad. It's been around for about 15 years or so, this field of research, and part of the research has focused on specific virtues, like we were talking about this morning, and I'm going to talk about 3 specific virtues that researchers have found bring us happiness in our lives, and those are purpose, awe, and gratitude. So the first thing I want to do, though, is talk about what exactly is happiness. So when the researchers started looking at happiness, as I said about 15 years ago, they didn't know where to start. They couldn't really just pull a definition out of air. So what they did was they went to ancient spiritual and philosophical traditions to try to understand how have these ancient traditions actually conceived of happiness. So they went to Buddhist teachings. They also went to the Bhagavad Gita and to the Quran and to the Bible and to Greek philosophers, many, many different spiritual and philosophical traditions to kind of get a sense of what is happiness and what does it mean. So from their work with all of this, they started with this particular definition. They said happiness is the experience of joy, contentment, or positive well-being combined with a sense that one's life is good, meaningful, and worthwhile. So happiness is not just that feeling of joy or contentment, depending on which culture you come from. Some cultures believe happiness is actually the feeling of positive emotions, like very happy, upbeat, that sort of thing. Others view happiness as more contentment, very calm. But it's not just that positive emotional state. It's also that your life has meaning to it. So the researchers then began to study, well, how do we actually cultivate happiness in our lives? And they found that there were 3 main ways that people cultivate happiness. The first is what's called the hedonic treadmill. So what this is, these are those things that you do in your life that give you a little boost of positive emotions. So it might be eating some very delicious sweet or dessert, or it might be a brand new motorcycle or car, or it could be I don't know if you have roller coasters here, but riding on a fast roller coaster. It's something that produces some sort of positive emotion in you. The challenge, though, that researchers found with this particular form of happiness boosting is that it becomes like a treadmill. You have to keep doing these things over and over and over again to get that boost of positive emotions. And so it's not a very sustainable way to cultivate happiness. The second way that researchers have found that cultivates happiness is actually what's called flow. So flow is a state of mind. It's when you are so engaged in an activity that you lose all sense of space and time. And the researchers have found oftentimes artists will have flow. They get so involved in what they're creating that they lose that sense of time. Mountain climbers will often have it. Scientists will have it. I'm sure many of you have also experienced a state of flow. If you think of something that really, really engages your attention, that's flow. Again, though, what the researchers found was that it's very difficult to live our lives in a state of flow. We're fortunate if we have it, I don't know, maybe once a week, once a month even, but again, not very sustainable. So the third way that they found that people cultivate happiness is what's called a meaningful life. And so again, a meaningful life is, as I described in the morning session, it's the feeling that your life and your experiences make sense and they matter. And what the researchers have found is that this is actually the most sustainable way for cultivating happiness in your life. Again, people who have a really strong sense of meaning in their life, they don't necessarily feel happy all the time. They don't feel the happy, positive emotions. But over a long period of time, it generates the happiest kind of life. So at the Greater Good Science Center at UC Berkeley, where I work, we study the science of happiness, and we translate it into ways that people can use the science in their life. And these are just some of the topics that we cover at the Greater Good Science Center. So you'll see we've got hope, we've got mindfulness, empathy, gratitude, compassion, altruism, purpose, awe. This is just a few of the virtues and practices that are encompassed in the science of happiness. But these are some of the main ones that we actually focus on. And the reason we focus on these specific ones is because these are the ones that connect us to other people. These are the ones that create the positive relationships, because what the researchers have found in the science of happiness is that having positive relationships with your loved ones, with friends, with people maybe you don't know, is actually part of what cultivates that meaningful life. It's part of what really generates happiness in our lives. And all of these things on this circle are all things that connect us to each other. So compassion, feeling compassion for another person, saying thank you to someone, having a sense of purpose, altruism, doing a selfless act. Again, this is what fosters these positive connections. So for the rest of this talk, I'm going to focus on three of these. I'm going to focus on purpose and awe, and also gratitude. So I'd like to start with purpose. So purpose is, the science of purpose is actually a fairly new field, and it's a very important one in the United States and the West, because many people actually don't feel like they have a sense of meaning or purpose in their lives. In fact, there was a study done of Americans, and they found that 40% of Americans did not feel that their lives had any meaning or sense of purpose. And that actually is a public health program, or public health problem, because what the researchers have found is that people who have a sense of meaning in their life, their health is so much better, they're so much happier, they do better in their jobs, students do better in school. It's really, really important to have that sense of meaning and purpose, but so many people in the West don't have it. And part of the reason they think that they don't have the sense of purpose and meaning is because we have so much freedom. We get to choose our lives. We don't have to, we get to choose what spiritual path or religion we want to follow, if we want to at all. We don't have a ruler who tells us what our life should be about. So instead, a lot of Americans are really trying to seek out, what is my life about? Why am I here? What is this for? And so that's why this research on purpose and meaning is so important. So with purpose, the way the researchers define it is it's something that is meaningful to you that also impacts the world beyond the self. And this is a really key piece to purpose, because a lot of students today, high school, secondary school students, college students, they make their goal to get into a really good university, or maybe they make their goal to make a lot of money, that sort of thing. That is not a true purpose, according to the scientists. According to the scientists, for true purpose, your purpose also has to benefit others around you. So, for example, a student who wants to become a doctor. So becoming a doctor is the goal, but the larger purpose is maybe you want to become a doctor because you really want to help find a cure for cancer or for some other kind of disease. That's a larger purpose. Another example of purpose might just be a student who just wants to have a really good, a really loving family and be able to support that family. Again, you know, they want to make a lot of money so that they can actually support their family. So again, it's not just about themselves, it also benefits others. Possibly another purpose would be perhaps there's a student who really loves to play a particular instrument, and while they themselves enjoy playing an instrument, they also want to share the beauty of their music with others as well. So lots and lots of different kinds of purposes, and sometimes many people's purpose is religious. They feel that the purpose of their life is to serve God, to serve something larger than themselves, to make the world a better place. So again, the purpose has to connect us to something outside of ourselves. So there was a really interesting study done with about 12,000 youth ages 12 to 24 in the United States, and they wanted to find out where students are in terms of finding a sense of purpose. And they found that students really fell into 4 different categories. The first were students who were completely disengaged. These were the students who were not searching for a purpose. They didn't have a sense of purpose at all, and they didn't care. They just weren't looking for it. So these were the disengaged students, and that was about 25% of the students. The next group of students, these were the dreamers. These are the ones who they had some interests. You know, they kind of knew what they were interested in. Maybe they liked a particular sport, maybe they liked a particular musical instrument, something like that, but you know, they really weren't doing anything in terms of going after it. So these were more of the dreamers. Then you have the dabblers. The dabblers are people who, they know what they're interested in. They know that maybe someday I want to go to medical school or something like that, but they're not really doing anything to pursue that sense of purpose. They might dabble here and there in trying something, but they're not really going for it. And then you have the students who are purposeful. These are the ones who know what they want and they're going after it. And so I put the picture up here of Malala Yousafzai because she would be an example of a very, very purposeful young person. She wants to promote education for girls all over the world, and she is going for it, and she's using all of her talents and all of her skills to actually promote it. So this is an example of a student who has a lot of purpose. So the researchers then looked at why is purpose actually good for youth. So some of the benefits are it makes us more resilient. We're able to bounce back from difficult times. It also creates a greater sense of psychological well-being and more satisfied with life. Interestingly, studying and homework is more meaningful to students because they know why they're studying. They know why they have to do this homework. They're also more engaged pro-socially, meaning that they're helping others, and they do better in school as well. They've got higher academic achievement. So then how can we actually help students cultivate a sense of purpose? One thing that was really important that the researchers found was that purpose has to come from within the student. It cannot be given to students by their parents or teachers. I know in many cultures, children are required to or obligated to do what their parents tell them to do. But in the West, there's a tremendous amount of freedom. Most of us can actually choose our careers. We can choose our lives. And so what the researchers found was that that sense of purpose, parents or teachers cannot tell students what their purpose is, because if they do, the students will not be motivated to actually follow their purpose. Also cultivating purpose, setting goals that benefit both themselves and others, extracurricular activities, so not just academics, not just sitting in class and learning about science and history and math and that sort of thing. It's also participating in things outside of school, because what students have to do is they have to try different things to see what their interests actually are. Also, it's very important to have a very strong social network. We need those relationships with other people because they support us in going after our purpose. Reflecting as well, being able to reflect on what you're doing. Maybe you try something. So maybe somebody goes out and they decide that they really love cricket, playing cricket. And they try it for maybe 6 months, but on reflection, they think, oh, you know what, cricket really isn't my thing. I would rather spend my time in the laboratory doing experiments because that's really, I'm passionate about, but really important to reflect on what you're doing. And then for adults, it's really important that we talk to our children about our sense of purpose and ask them, about theirs. So really engage them in dialogue. And then finally, cultivating an entrepreneurial attitude, meaning teaching students and children how to start things. Because oftentimes students, they may have something that they're interested in, but they don't know how to begin. And so by teaching them how to take those first steps, it helps them engage in that sense of purpose. So the next So that's kind of a brief overview of the science of purpose. And I'd like to now move on to awe. And the reason I like to follow purpose with awe is because of the benefits of what awe actually is. Now, I understand from my discussions with translators that there isn't a direct word that translates what awe actually is. But at breakfast this morning, we came up with hediwa. Is that right? Did I say that right? Hediwa? Hediwa. Anyway, we were trying to find a word that would actually translate awe. But rather than tell you what awe is, I'd like to see if it's possible for you to perhaps experience it. And so I'm going to show you a video that was showed to people in laboratories to help them to see if this kind of video would actually bring up the emotion awe. So what I'd like you to do is, as you're watching this video, just notice, are you having any kind of physical effect? Do you notice anything in your body, any kind of feeling in your chest, or are you having any kind of experience in your mind? Just notice how this video actually impacts you. I hope it works. let me ask anyone just a show of hands. How many of you felt something, you know, watching this video? Did you feel any kind of physical thing in your chest, in your mind, any kind of emotional sort of response to it? Maybe here and there. So, okay, over there. All right. Yes, okay, a little bit. Yeah, here and there. Okay, wonderful. So, so what the researchers have, the way they've defined awe is this feeling of being in the presence of something vast and greater than yourself that exceeds our current knowledge structures. So let me explain that a little bit more. Let me see where I got this. Nope, okay. I don't have a slide for that. But what awe requires two things. So the first is you have this feeling of expansion, whether it's a physical sense of expansion or a mental sense of expansion or emotional feeling of expansion. But then what happens after that feeling of expansion is it's transformational in your mind. It actually changes how you view yourself in the world and your place in it. So it's both this feeling of expansion and also this complete shift, which can really be mind-blowing for people of how you view yourself. Okay, thank you. All right, I only have 5 minutes. So it's this very powerful emotion, and the reason I couple this with purpose is because you can imagine maybe a student in secondary school saw that video and had this feeling of awe and felt connected to something larger than themselves, and all of a sudden they were inspired to do something for the environment, to become an environmental engineer or do something to help us save our environment. So some of the mental and physical effects of awe is we might get goosebumps on our arms. We also have this sense of being connected to something larger than ourselves, and we also feel this common humanity. It creates this sense of interconnectedness. And so again, really good for purpose, to think beyond ourselves. So in terms of how scientists have measured the effects of awe, there was a really interesting study that was done at UC Berkeley. And what they did was they took a group of students and they took them to, they divided them into two groups. And one group, they had them lie down on the ground and look up at a group of really huge, tall trees. Just gaze at these gigantic trees. The other group, they had them just look at a building for about a minute, and that's it. That's all they did was look at a building. So the idea was for those students who were looking up at the trees, would that actually induce this sense of awe, this feeling of expansion, that I'm part of something larger than myself? And then what they found was that the students who looked up at the trees, their sense of self-importance, meaning that I am an important person in the world, it's all about me, that level of self-importance actually went down. Because in the West we have a huge problem with feeling that we're super important. And so what awe did was it actually lessened that feeling of self-importance, whereas the students who looked at a building, it did not. So again, the research on awe is very, very new, but it's very powerful as well. So I am going to, so in terms of what cultivates awe, what the scientists have found is nature, so being out in nature, art, looking at beautiful, beautiful works of art can do it. Also looking at people who have done tremendous things with their lives, that can cultivate awe as well. And then grand ideas, looking at how our world works, how our universe works, that can also give us a sense of awe. So I want to close, because I only have a couple minutes left, I want to close with gratitude. Gratitude is one of those very beautiful, simple acts of just saying thank you that is so powerful. There's been a lot of research done on gratitude and the benefits of it, and it's just tremendous. So gratitude is this feeling of reverence for things that are given to us. And this feeling of reverence, it comes from that something good has happened in your life. and it's not necessarily deserved. You didn't necessarily earn it, and it's due to the actions of other people. So somebody did something for you, not for any particular reason, and that brings up this sense of gratitude. So gratitude really, really matters because first, it strengthens our social ties. Some researchers say that gratitude is kind of the great virtue because it really cultivates our sense of interconnectedness. And then fascinatingly, researchers have found that gratitude can actually increase our sense of worth, our worth as a human being. And the reason it does this is because when somebody does something for us, we realize that that person actually wishes us well. They want us to be healthy. They want us to be happy in life. And in turn, we feel very loved and very cared for. And that this actually creates a sense of value in ourselves. In the West, we have many people have a very difficult time liking themselves, liking who they are as a person. There's a lot of, we beat ourselves up. We're very hard on ourselves. And when somebody does something for us, it tells us that we are actually a very valuable person. So the way gratitude works is grateful people, they tend to really notice the positive in life. You know, many people go around with a negative view of life. Everything's bad in my life, nothing's good. Whereas people who have a sense of gratitude, they notice the positive things that are happening to them, and they tend to savor them. They tend to focus on happy memories. And the effects of gratitude are tremendous. What the researchers have found is it helps us sleep better, it helps our physical health, it helps reduce anxiety and depression. Just from the simple act of noticing what is good in our life and what has value. So I'm going to actually stop there because I think I'm out of time. And I just want to thank you all very, very much for your attention.
Thank you very much for Dr. Vicki for your wonderful presentation. So now we have to, like a 15 minutes, usually actually 10, 20 minutes for Q&A, but I think we have that 15 minutes, and I would like to, Dr. Mohit and Joshi, if you have a question for Dr. Vicki first, and then for the nuns.
Thank you, Vicki, for such beautiful presentation. I was just curious, what was the percentage of students who had purpose in your study?
It was about 20% of the students out of a sample size of 12,000 across the United States, ages 12 to 24. Only 20%, so 1 in 5 students had a sense of purpose.
Did you explore any determinants of these children, like who had purpose, some of the other variables?
So not necessarily actual determinants, but some of the ways that I talked about cultivating purpose in life. So a lot of these students had opportunities to explore things. They had the support of their parents, the support of their teachers. They engaged in discussion with adults in their life in order to discover what their purpose actually was. They had the freedom to explore.
Thank you. Yes.
Gilang dandara kari jere lawate ani kari gewari nda bolasra kasi mechi gira ani suzutis kangayon da chil koma gianda chil labi inara ndanga rosa yara tik be ya bolas san ko ni gasunda wishibe ina anti gewa shul zikyona kandina.
So if a person is tired and hungry and he has no money, and if you teach him how to steal and get food, and by that he gets satisfaction and he feels happy, right, after getting food because he's hungry. And with that satisfaction, like if the person gets satisfied and he becomes happy, and do you think this as a virtue?
That's a great ethical question. No, I would say that is not a virtue, because stealing is harmful to others, and my understanding of virtue is that it cannot be harmful either to the self or to other people.
Tanda di gewa gansi mes khais na kuma gyawa la jura di ngarang gyawa na shagi mes di kuma gyawa na susu ina re shen la ina re shen la tap nu kyue gi ta chaju ji chagi yoras che zan thanda kuma kuwa se di ni gyawa na sigi mes ngarang ina.
So, any more question from you?
Chua yu na.
Tanda gimbigi gi tamshin na la ya ani lobdu arile lobdu khashi thona yugin da ani thona migin do jisung so ani tanda thona migin pu di zo ani mizi de khonzo digi de dogira ani khonzo lani khandis digi de la thalam khonzo khandis tungire yamado yemeda ne yushagire khandires.
So you talked about two types of students. One is the engaged one, the other one is disengaged. So how can this group of disengaged students, can they cultivate happiness?
That's a great question. So for the students who are disengaged, and again, it's going to be individual to each student. But one of the ways that I think adults can really help students who are disengaged is by creating a connection with them. By showing that you as the adult are really interested in who that child is, who that student is, because as that student gets a sense that they are being cared for, it's going to engage them more in their academic studies. And then I would also add, as the adult gets to know that student, really find out what their interests are. What are you passionate about in life? What gets you excited in life? And really try to show an interest in the student. And what the research has found is that students who feel very cared for by their teachers, by the adults in their life, they tend to be more engaged. So a lot of it comes down to that relationship between the teacher and the student, or the adult and the student.
And that dicha shawena ngaransu mi tharma gembe dilo roba chitu res ni khandis chitu lawana phaju nyamdo dewa yapuji telam yapuji sue pugudi nyamdo an pugudi thanang khari khari chido korangi ing khari khari do di changmal thanan chi jegyong do tewana pugudi susula thanan chi ani thanda namdin do korang yarge drejero di to thu res and di ngaransu gi thanda ngaransu shimju dendi chini nye res di phaju la thanan chi ing khari do di changmata waina pugudi roba chitu res.
Ginagira de so number manda mangbo shasara dinanglo ni so chi ni miktip la ya shasara ani remoji ti de ni samlo matam de ni dia so digi de so digi khandis changin so digi khandis.
So when you talked about happiness, you talked about flow. So can you elaborate on what this flow is about?
So flow is a state of mind. And it's when you are so engaged in what you are doing that you lose all sense of time and space around you. And so oftentimes, I think as I mentioned, people who are engaged in creating art, who are engaged in doing science experiments, perhaps in mountain climbing, rock climbing, oftentimes these people have a state of flow. So it's very much a mental state.
Tanda miktip said it so kharil chan shigur seoina samlu nebab jura di ko shigures di tanda miktip le kap so samlu nebab khande jur lawna susu thunang shu chumbu shu mi ko chigle dimni thunang chi de di tuju di chagures ampe shawana remote ya da riza da dindi kap so ne dang jura di samlu ne dang di khari chagur lana mi ko chigle tendu kala susu kha yume dan tuju khande yume din dindi sangma choga jura di me chi mi ko chigrang la dim de di samlu nebab dilani miktip sigures.
Thank you. So I have one question from the audience. In terms of science, can we get permanent happiness?
Can we get permanent happiness? Oh, wouldn't that be fantastic? I don't know. I don't know that. Western scientists, and again, I don't want to limit it to Western scientists, have an idea of what permanent happiness actually is. I think they're more interested in how do we actually cultivate happiness in our lives, and how can we cultivate happiness in our lives over the long term. But this idea of permanent happiness, I'm not sure that they actually have a sense of what that is and how to actually cultivate it.
Just to add to that, what we know in Western science or modern science depends on whom we are observing. When we have more people who are having this permanent happiness, probably our science will also grow further. So it will depend on the sample with whom we are able to do this study. Just coming back to the earlier question on the flow, I just wanted to mention something which we have also found in India. We had also done this kind of study looking at these 3 different pathways to happiness, pleasure and flow and meaning. And 2 interesting things which we found. One was as flow is seen in like modern science is that there is also a balance between how challenging an activity is and what are our capacities. So if something just matches our challenge, like our abilities or just above it, so we keep trying our best to maybe do it, reach and expand our capacities, and during that moment we have this flow. In our study which we found was a lot of people find flow when the challenge is slightly less than capacity. So it's like a joy and a sense of mastery instead of, because the moment it goes above the ability level, people start feeling stressed. So that was one thing which we found interestingly. The second thing which we also looked at qualitatively, interviews and all, and we found that the idea of flow and idea of something which is personally meaningful, these activities were very similar. And then in later studies, we started using a joint group, like, okay, pleasure was separate, yes, but then meaningful engagements, rather than like, no, meaning is separate and flow and engagement is separate.
Was electing Donald Trump as the US president the lack of purpose in the people of the United States?
All right, speaking for the people of the United States. That's a great question, because those of the United States are also wondering, how did we elect Donald Trump? So at least the people I know. No, it was not a lack of sense of purpose. It was a disagreement in values, I would say in virtues, in terms of how we live our lives, in terms of how we view human beings. And so this is something that we have to really contend with in the United States. We have to figure out, and again, I am speaking from the side that did not elect Donald Trump. And so it's only fair that somebody who did elect him would also have a voice, so I can only speak from that side. But in the United States, we really have a lot of work to do in understanding how this happened and how we can actually all get along. Because the United States is similar to India, is unique in some ways because there is so much diversity. You have all these different groups of people who are trying to live together under one government, and it is challenging. It is challenging, but I think that if we can succeed in doing this, I think it's an extraordinary opportunity and model for the rest of the world is how do we bring people who are not similar, who maybe have different beliefs, different backgrounds, different skin colors, different religions. How can we bring these groups together to actually live together in harmony? And I think it's one of the great questions, not just of now, but of the ages. I think it's something that humankind has been struggling with ever since we've been in existence. So again, I'm on a soapbox, so I apologize, but I think this is an extraordinary moment in history where all of us on this planet have to look within ourselves and ask, how can we live together, and wish everybody on this planet health and happiness.